Most rock enthusiasts know about Brian Wilson's breakdown back in late 1964. And throughout the 60s, he was plagued with drug problems. And over the years, that's what's been pointed to as giving Brian his mental problems. But there was more to it than his drug addictions. The Beach Boys were traveling to Australia in December 1964 when Brian had a mild panic attack. The only thing that kept him calm was thinking about his girlfriend, Marilyn. So from the airplane, he sent her a message and asked her to wait for his phone call. And once they arrived in Australia, he gave her a call and asked her to marry him. And then just a few days later, on December 7th, Brian and Marilyn got married. Just a little over 2 weeks after the wedding, the Beach Boys were on their way to Houston for another concert. And that's when Brian suffered his nervous breakdown. Brian was already stressed out from Capitol Records and their demands for new product. Brian was writing and producing and performing and singing and recording, doing it all. He was stressed out, and he was already experiencing mood swings. And he didn't like to tour. He didn't like to fly. So they were only in the air for 5 minutes, and Brian started crying and making shrieking noises and screaming. He picked up a pillow and started screaming into it. He fell out of his seat, and he started crying on the floor of the plane. A couple of the other Beach Boys tried to calm him down, but they just couldn't do it. Brian was having a breakdown. Once they landed in Houston, Brian said, "You got to send me back. Send me back home. I have to go back." In the meantime, he got off the plane and spent the afternoon in his hotel room. And finally, they sent him back to Los Angeles. He said, "I want to see my mom." His mother met him at the airport. He was just crying his eyes out. And he spent that day with her, pouring out his soul. There's no way he wanted to see his father. His father, Murray, was abusive to all three Wilson boys throughout their youths, going so far as hitting Brian on the head with a board, which made him deaf in one ear. Brian also suffered from stage fright. He was okay with not performing and touring. What he really wanted to do was make records. So once he took himself off the road, they recruited Glenn Campbell, that's right, Glenn Campbell, to replace him for a couple of months before Bruce Johnson became a permanent member of the band. But there's something about Brian's breakdown that very rarely gets mentioned. As I mentioned earlier, it was just a little over 2 weeks after Brian and Marilyn got married, and the Beach Boys were getting ready to get on their plane to go to Houston. Now, what is left out of most descriptions of Brian's breakdown is the following. While he waited to get on that plane, he glanced over at his wife, Marilyn, who appeared to be gazing at Mike Love, one of the fellow Beach Boys, and Brian's cousin. Brian wondered what's going on between Marilyn and Mike, and this greatly upset him. So added to his stress and stage fright of performing, and the typical newlywed arguments that he and Marilyn were having, seeing his new wife gazing at his cousin added to everything else and pushed him over the edge. But as we all know, Brian went on to compose and produce one of the greatest rock albums of all time, Pet Sounds, and one of the greatest rock singles of all time, Good Vibrations. And ever since December of 1964, there have been numerous stories that became legendary about Brian's drug intake and his mental behavior. But he outlived all his brothers. He outlived his parents. He was the last one alive. And finally, he passed away on June 11th, 2025. And to this day, he's gaining young fans and admirers who were born decades after the Beach Boys' heyday, and they're appreciating the musical genius of Brian Wilson.